let's talk distortion. You know that growly, raspy, scratchy, rough, discordant sound that singers use in a variety of genres. From metal to R&B, musical theater to bluegrass, this is one of the most mysterious affects that I've come across. And we've been getting some questions from you guys. Is distortion healthy? Can I learn to do it? Can the singing straw help? Well, stick around because you're in luck. Today, I have Nicole Gill, an expert in distortion. She's been researching it for years. She's a friend and colleague of mine, and I'm super excited to bring her on, interview her, and get more information about this mysterious and pretty badass, amazing sound, distortion. Before we get started, if you're new here, my name is Whitney Nichole, and I'm a vocal coach, singer-songwriter, studio owner, and creator of The Singing Straw, which is a rad tool that helps singers around the world develop healthier, stronger, and more balanced voices. So if that sounds like something you're into, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button down below. So let's dive into distortion with Nicole Gill. Hello, Nicole. It's so nice to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Everybody, welcome Nicole Gill. She is an amazing singer, performer, vocal coach, and vocal researcher, researcher. So Nicole, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you specialize in?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a contemporary vocal coach and I'm based in London. I started researching vocal distortion about 3 years ago through my MA. I've got lots of friends that are off on tour with sort of rock band, or were pre-quarantine, in rock bands. Yep. And I was just kind of fed up of hearing all these horror stories of people, injuring themselves through distortion. And I was thinking, right, I'm actually, quite all right at vocal physiology and stuff. So I was like, why not just, throw yourself in here and look into distortion and fill the gap? Because there is a very significant gap in research in vocal distortion. So yeah, I just kind of decided, right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to research it. And now we're here 3 years later. I've completed my master's.
Congratulations. That's huge.
Yeah. And it's all good. Yeah, we're going really well. So yeah, that's me.
I love it. And distortion is one of those buzzwords a lot of people ask about. And I love, as a vocal coach, I love to kind of break the rules and push back against what's been taught to us or told to us. I'm not your average vocal coach, if you know what I mean. And in the world of contemporary voice, I think that suits really well. There isn't necessarily like an agreed upon, there's a lot that's still subjective, if you will. And you might hear one thing from one vocal coach and a complete opposite from another vocal coach or singing teacher. And so I think that rooting in sort of like anatomy and physics and science is really helpful. And I love that you kind of took that lens to distortion, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, massively. Yeah. Because I mean, essentially as vocal coaches, we are literally dealing with muscles, airflow, you kind of have to have a bit of knowledge about the science and stuff, right? We're dealing with people's bodies at the end of the day,
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. We just can't see and touch them in the same way that if we were coaches of a sport, for example, you can fix someone's bat swing by adjusting their knuckles. So from our perspective, we've got to understand what's going on, then sort of guesstimate with what's happening inside of a student based on what we hear and what we see, and then help them. So the more that we can get in the background, I love that. So can you just give us a brief, what's the definition of distortion for those who kind of maybe don't know exactly what we're talking about here?
So I would class distortion as a literally like a distortion of the sound waves. So obviously when we sing, if you hear a note, obviously we hear harmonic noise. Essentially we hear a note, we hear a pitch. With distortion, it's inharmonic, which means it's essentially noise, like your ear can't translate the noise as a pitch. So that's what we're talking about with distortion. And you can have pure distortion where you literally just hear noise, or you can have distortion on top of a sung note as well. And essentially the way that happens is just by constricting different parts of the vocal tract, which then disturb the air. So obviously your vocal folds sing a note or distort or do whatever. And then above that, you've got, structures that essentially just disturb that airwave, the sound wave, sorry. And that's essentially what distortion is.
Yes. So some examples with singers out in the world using distortion. Can you give us a couple of different examples?
So we've got like Corey Taylor, Slipknot.
Yeah, totally.
We've got the singer of Ginger,
Mm-hmm.
You've seen Ginger.
I've seen Ginger. I've seen some stuff you've insane. Oh my gosh. Go YouTube that, people, right now.
Yeah. We've got bands like Architects, While She Sleeps. God, so many.
Yeah.
Brain block right now.
Definitely. And so are there, like, in terms of what you're researching, are there is there a range of sounds that we can classify as distortion? Because you sort of said it's just any disturbance, right? Any sort of chaos in the sound waves, right? So would that include like a growl or a little bit of like rasp that you hear in a pop singer or a blues singer, or are we talking about different things?
So we can class things like Christina Aguilera or Beyonce, that you are beautiful, that kind of noise. Or we can go like full, oi! Or we can have a fry scream, which is more like, yeah. The thing is, with distortion, there's loads of different terminology that's flown around, and there is no set terminology. So it's quite difficult to pinpoint what is what,
Yeah.
And that's something that still needs to be kind of, awareness needs to be raised really on the terminology, because some people call it rasp, some people call it growl, some people call it distortion, some people call it screaming, and
they're all in the same family, right? Would you say they're all in the same
family?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
100%. Yeah, they're all distortion.
Exactly. Yeah. So tell me, I think as a teacher, I know that sometimes we can be cautious of not wanting to do anything that might hurt our student, right? Or that might hurt the singer. So answer me the question, if you will, or if you dare. Can distortion be healthy? Or is it just blanket always bad for you?
Oh, it's 100% healthy. So I did a study on this, God, how long was it? 2 years ago, where I basically tested the efficiency of the vocal folds in a group of singers before and after 10 minutes of vocal distortion, and actually found that their voices were more warmed up after doing 10 minutes of false fold screaming.
Amazing.
So that just shows you,
I love it. I mean, I think that, I love pushing the boundaries with our voices. And I think that is part of keeping it healthy, right? You don't want to live on the edge constantly in terms of any type of extreme singing, which distortion falls into that, but so would belting or, even like really, really high singing. So, you want to be able to stretch your voice to those places, but then know how to bring yourself back and to balance it out, right?
Yeah, I think the thing with distortion, if you can get the coordination right, it's absolutely healthy and it's fine. In the process of getting it right, you're probably going to do it wrong. And that's when it's dangerous, because in order to get healthy distortion, we need to make sure that the vocal folds themselves aren't literally shouting and bashing together, because that's then when it becomes abusive. If you allow the vocal folds to be slightly more open to allow the airflow through, and then the structures above are constricted, you're fine. But it's just getting used to that constriction, because that's not obviously something that we're brought up to be able to do. It's not really part of our vocabulary, so it's completely foreign to us. So in the early days is when you need to be careful of abuse, essentially, to the voice.
Yeah. So how would somebody go about learning how to experiment with distortion in their voice if they had no experience with it thus far? What would be your advice to them?
Honestly, get a teacher that knows how to do it properly.
Great. Yeah.
And it's not worth it, to get it wrong.
Definitely. So to be guided through that process by somebody who can help, right?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. Yeah. I think especially if you're a singer, you're putting your career on the line at the end of the day, aren't you?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And I think
the cost of their voice.
Yeah. And I think, how do you know somebody is an expert in distortion?
Well, this is the issue, isn't it?
I mean, is your schedule booked? No.
Yeah. It's just me, guys. It's just me. So yeah, there's not many around, if I'm being really honest. Yeah. There isn't enough. I'm actually in the process of developing a teacher training course to try and spread the training, because, I can't teach everyone. I mean, there are other distortion teachers out there, but like I say, they're so far spread and it's just finding them,
Yep.
I would probably say if you can't find a specialist, go to someone that is in a heavy metal band or something. Because at the end of the day, they've learned to do it, and they're able to gig very regularly doing it. So therefore they're probably doing it right. So if you can't afford lessons, maybe approach friends that do it.
Mm-hmm.
But I would always definitely recommend going to a specialist for sure.
Yeah. So this is a good question. Can the singing straw help in terms of this process of learning how to use distortion?
So 100% in terms of warming up and cooling down. So with distortion, obviously, because you don't want the vocal folds to be like smacking together, you don't want lots of chest voice. So using a straw, especially like a singing straw, will kind of push the singer into that more head dominant space. And then obviously you get all the benefits of semi-occluded exercises as well. So I would always say, I often do with all of my students, is warm up with the straw for like 5 minutes, and then to cool down with the straw as well afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the idea is not necessarily that we're using the straw to get distortion, but rather we're using it as like a safety of preparing your voice for that experimentation and then relaxing it and letting go of any tension if, you know, maybe you ended up in sort of like a heavier coordination than you want it to be, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I love that. I think that's so important, you know. And so how much, when you would say someone's starting out with distortion, are they working, how much should they be working a day? So say they have some guidance, say they've, you know, they kind of know what to do to get started in terms of exercises. They've got their straw, they're doing a warm up and a cool down after. Are we talking a half an hour work? Are we talking an hour of work? Are we talking a minute of work? Like how much distortion when you're, go ahead.
Like 30 seconds.
Yeah. Way less than they want to, right?
Yeah. No matter how bad you want to keep going, like you just need to stop after about 30 seconds when you first start, because otherwise, if you do it for longer, you know, you might not, you know, injure yourself or give yourself a vocal pathology, but what you probably are going to do is fatigue yourself, and then you're going to have to go on voice rest for 3 days, and then you set yourself behind in practice. And the way that obviously the brain learns how to do new things is lots of repetition, small steps, you know. So lots of small practices you're going to learn way quicker anyway. Than if you do like drill yourself for an hour and get fatigued and then have to go on rest for the next few days, you know. So literally like 30 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with you. Yeah. So once you sort of get the guidance and kind of have an idea of what you're doing a little bit every day, just to sort of get a sense for that new positioning, right? Throughout the vocal tract or the experimentation of where you're constricting, right?
Yeah. And also when you first start doing distortion, it can be a little bit sore because you're obviously bashing things together that aren't used to being bashed together. So you get a bit feedback, your body kind of shouts at you a little bit for the first few times, so it's getting used to that feeling as well, that sensation. But yeah, and I mean, if you do like 30 seconds of practice in the morning and then actually you get to then go, oh, actually I feel fine, you can always do another practice in the evening, you know. It's just listening to your body and making sure that you take it easy.
Yes, definitely. That warm up and cool down is one of those things I feel like works for, or is so beneficial to singers. And so many people don't do it, don't realize that. And it's so easy. It's just such a short, like, you know, glide, a couple of glides that you can do, but the impact, it's one of those underrated, like vocal exercises or tools that I think makes a big difference for professional singers, especially.
Yeah. Totally, 100%. Yeah, pro straw.
Always. I mean, there are other ways to cool down without a straw, but straw phonation specifically and SOVT work gives you all these extra benefits, hence why we love it so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so tell me a little bit about like, so when you work with singers, do you work with singers or people that like, say they're out there and they're already using distortion in their practice, they're already singing and performing with it, but perhaps they run into some trouble. Do singers like that come and see you? And if so, what is that process like?
Usually it's more related to their singing voice than the distorted voice, because once you've grasped distortion, it's actually quite easy, you know. So usually it's actually more to do with the vocal side of stuff than the distortion side of stuff. And usually it's things like strain, because this is the thing as well, like obviously if you're in a heavy metal band, you're going to be head banging all the time, which like obviously leaves a lot of tension in the neck and shoulders, and carrying equipment, you know. In your voice just to talk, you know, all of these things, usually it's more related to that than the actual distortion element, which is a bit crazy when you think about it, because distortion sounds extreme, but actually when you learn to do it, it's actually quite simple.
Yeah, I love that. So awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. This is really great. Just kind of getting a little, hang on. Do you hear that loud noise in the background?
I can't hear it.
Okay, that's really good. That's good to know because they're like cutting tile in the other room. They were quiet all morning and they're cutting tile. And I hear this. I was like, okay, all right.
That was good distortion.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. This has been so awesome. I love talking about distortion and just getting into the stuff because I feel like it's really exciting and also just a little bit sexy and cool. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's like, let's push the boundaries of our voice. Let's make things like, I love to make things ugly before they're pretty and rough. So that is like, for me, what distortion's all about. But it's just been like a very slight, brief touch on some distortion. I know there's so much more out there to learn. And so people who are really interested in this, where can they find you and other resources to sort of like move forward in their journey with distortion?
So yeah, I haven't been releasing much as of yet, but now I've finished my master's, there's definitely things to look out for. So the best way to see that is my Instagram, Nicole Gill Vocal Coach. Or my website, www.nicolegillvocalcoach.com.
Awesome. And I will link those below so you guys can go find Nicole. Her work is amazing. But yeah, thank you so much for being here and taking a few minutes to kind of talk about all this stuff with us, Nicole. I really appreciate it. It's always great to see you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We'll have to bring you back and then we can do some actual distortion sometime. If you're interested, drop a comment below and tell us and we will come back and do some actual distortion, the two of us. Okay. Thank you, Nicole. It's been so wonderful. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.